The Ford Focus has long been one of the world's most popular cars, though it's never quite scaled such great heights here in Australia. But now there's a new generation model with a more contemporary look, greater array of interior and active safety technologies, but maintaining the familiar sporty DNA that has long made the Focus a dynamic standout in the small car class. Here are 6 things that we think you need to know ahead of the launch. Ford has made the fact that the Focus is now to be sourced from Germany a big part of its marketing spiel, clearly positioning the car directly against the Volkswagen Golf at the upper end of the mainstream market. Previously, it was just the sporty ST and RS versions that came out of Europe. There's no doubt Ford reckons there's brand cachet in this. There are just 2 spec levels from launch, the entry-level Trend that we have here, plus the sportier ST line. Around March next year, we'll get the Active, kind of the crossover derivative to rival the Subaru XV, as well as the flagship Focus Titanium. I quite like this interior. It's a pretty simple and pared-back design. There are some nice material choices to sort of break up the somber look, and a floating tablet screen. It's 8 inches in diameter and it's running Ford's Sync 3 infotainment. That means Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, as well as digital radio, plus integrated sat-nav with live traffic updates. It can also act as a Wi-Fi hotspot, has conversational voice control that's tuned to recognise the quite peculiar Australian accent, and also has Ford's Emergency Assist, a GPS-based system to dial emergency services if you're in an accident and incapacitated. At the heart of the Focus is a brand new 1.5 litre turbocharged petrol engine with only 3 cylinders. Now, you auto enthusiasts might be interested to know it's essentially the same engine as that used in the new Fiesta ST hot hatch. Now, don't let that reduced cylinder count alarm you. Peak power is a very reasonable 134 kilowatts and max torque is 240 newton meters, available from just 1600 RPM. It's matched as standard to an 8-speed automatic transmission of the torque converter variety, controlled by a novel rotary dial shifter, and comes as standard with auto start stop and even a cylinder deactivation system. I really like this little engine. It's got that distinctive note or soundtrack that any good 3-cylinder has. It's kind of off-kilter, keening, warbly. It's really quite engaging. But it also doesn't feel unbalanced or lumpy at idle. Ford's done a really good job of improving the refinement, and anyone who hasn't driven a 3-pot engine in a while should know that they're not quite like they used to be. It's also got really good response. It's got a heap of torque available from just off idle point that makes it feel a lot more muscular than perhaps it has any right to. Ford claims a 0 to 100 time of just 8.5 seconds, but its rolling response is even more impressive than that. I also quite like this 8-speed torque converter automatic. It's really well calibrated and tuned, and there's a couple of different driving modes that change the throttle mapping and shift points depending on what type of driving you want to do. Now, of course, we don't want to talk too much about Ford's power shift gearbox woes from the previous Focus, but needless to say, this time around, it's a much more convincing effort. One of the hallmarks of the Focus for quite some time has been its sportier than average driving dynamics. But there are a number of mainstream rivals that have really upped their game in this department in recent times. I'm thinking, of course, of the Hyundai i30 and the Toyota Corolla. But I'm pleased to report that this new Focus is every bit as dynamic and agile as the ones that have come before it. It's on a new platform that feels stiffer and lighter with a lower centre of gravity, so it's super agile with great directional changes. It's pretty cushy and comfortable for daily driving as well. It's on 16-inch wheels wrapped in Continental rubber with nice high sidewalls that really iron out sharper road hits and cobbles and potholes and things like that. The motor-driven power steering is a little bit better than what was used in the previous car, a bit sharper and more direct and responsive from centre. It is worth noting though that this time the Focus hatch comes as standard with a torsion beam rear suspension setup. In Europe you can get a multi-link as an option, but here multi-link is only fitted to the Wagon. Now, I know what you're thinking, a torsion beam, for all of its benefits, lighter weight, better packaging and cheaper cost, is generally inferior when it comes to road halting compared to a multi-link. However, this is the same torsion beam setup used in the Fiesta ST, and there aren't too many people complaining about that car's handling. There's also a new ST line derivative that will have to tide you over until the properly hot new ST and RS versions arrive. The engine is the same, but there are stiffer springs, dropping the ride by 10mm. This version also adds a flat bottom steering wheel, dark headlining, metal pedals, twin tailpipes, unique alloys and a modest body kit. The main body type will be the 5-door hatchback. Reflecting consumer tastes, Ford has axed the 4-door sedan altogether. Now this hatch has a temporary spare wheel underneath, about equivalent boot space to a Golf, and the back seats fold 60/40 to liberate a longer loading area. However, those wanting more room and who are perhaps reticent to get an SUV should know that there's now a wagon version of the Focus in Australia to rival the Holden Astra and Renault Megane, as well as, of course, the Golf. This sleeker version is about 30cm longer than the hatch and has 40% greater cargo capacity plus a 2-tiered floor. It's only available here in ST line guys though, at a $2,000 premium. Speaking of price, Ford has made a similar approach with the new Focus to Volkswagen with the Golf, or even Toyota with the new Corolla. In other words, there's no longer a 20 grand base model with steel wheels and no equipment inside. So the entry-level trend is $25,990 before on-road costs, a fair bit more than, for example, an i30 Go or Astra RS. The ST line is $28,990, the imminent active crossover version $29,990, and the flagship titanium $34,990. In other words, Ford is focusing on value rather than headline pricing. It's interesting to note that a growing number of brands are taking this tactic with pricing, not bothering with ultra-sharp entry models, knowing full well that most people don't buy them anyway. So that's a quick look at the 2019 Ford Focus, which on first impressions strikes all the right chords. Contemporary design outside and in, and those familiar sporty dynamics that now seem to be better than ever. As always, leave us a comment below telling us what you think, and head over to caradvice.com for the written component of this review for even more information.